It brought us the Roaring Twenties, the Space Age and the Information Age, the 50s and the 60s, radio, television, satellites, and cell phones all caught up in a swirling sea of change. And it introduced a new voice in music, our voice, from the ground to the air to the sky to the concert hall. This has been the American Century. Welcome to the American Century, an exploration of America's modern musical legacy, hosted by David Dubal. The American Century is sponsored on 96.3 FM WQXR by American Century Investments, with over 40 years mutual fund management experience.
This is the American Century. WQXR 96.3 FM is pleased to present a weekly presentation of American music of this, the 20th century. I'm your host, David Dubal. Today we have a variety of styles in the work of Victor Herbert, Bruce Adolphe, Gunther Schuller, Elliott Carter, piano pieces by McDowell, and songs by Cadman, Carpenter, and Charles Ives. To open the American Century, let's sample Bruce Adolphe's String Quartet No. 2, subtitled Turning, Returning. Mr. Adolphe was born in 1955. He has a distinguished career as composer, music advisor of the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, and he has taught at NYU, the Juilliard School, and at Yale. He has written 2 books, most interesting books, The Mind's Ear and What to Listen For in the World. The composer wrote, "Composing means giving form to sound. In music, form is organic. Structure emerges from ideas. Ideas are born of memory. Memory and imagination are partners." On today's program, we hear the first movement of his second string quartet, the movement titled At Night. The composer says the piece is about sleeplessness caused by turning and returning to an idea around in the mind. We hear the Brentano String Quartet in this performance of the String Quartet No. 2 by Bruce Adolphe. That was Bruce Adolph's very evocative At Night, the first movement of his second string quartet composed in 1991. The composer himself was born in 1955, and that was Mr. Adolph's first appearance on WQXR's The American Century. Let's move back in time to the turn of the century. America was emerging as one of the world's great countries, and one of its culture heroes was Victor Herbert, star composer of the operetta stage, a cellist of virtuoso attainment, the conductor of his brass band in New York's Central Park, one of the forces in founding ASCAP, the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, as well as the conductor of the Pittsburgh Symphony. Herbert was born in 1859 and died in 1924. That was the year of George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, which was premiered at Aeolian Hall. And as John Warthen Struble points out, it was the year that the country was embroiled in the Teapot Dome scandal and the Leopold and Loeb murder case. But let's hear two works of very innocent romanticism by Victor Herbert: Yester Thoughts and The Mountain Brook. Lynn Harrell is cellist. Neville Mariner leads the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. Yesterthoughts and The Mountain Brook were heard performed by cellist Lynn Harrell, and Sir Neville Mariner conducted the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. The composer, the Irish-American Victor Herbert. And later in this program we shall hear the first movement of his second cello concerto. But let's now explore American music for wind quintet. We shall hear a work by the 20-year-old Gunther Schuller, who was born in New York in 1925. Gunther Schuller himself is a fine horn player and has been an important administrator at the New England Conservatory in Boston. His compositions are numerous, and he has often integrated jazz into them. His best-known score remains the 1959 Seven Studies on themes of Paul Klee. The Suite for Woodwind Quintet is short and rather sweet. It is around 6 minutes in length in 3 movements labeled Prelude, Blues, and Toccata. This is Gunther Schuller's first hearing on the American Century, and the Sierra Wind Quintet makes this possible. that quite digestible score was the Suite for Woodwind Quintet, composed in 1945 by a 20-year-old Gunther Schuller, today one of the foremost figures on the American cultural scene. The ensemble was the Sierra Wind Quintet, and we'll return to them a bit later to hear music by Elliott Carter. But first, let's hear from an album of songs of an innocent age with tenor Paul Sperry. That innocent age was the United States at the turn of the century. Singing and playing the piano in the family parlor was a psychological experience of great warmth and intimacy, something that I think we sorely miss. Paul Sperry is an American singer who in his innovative programming has come up with wonderful gems of Americana which he is preserving. Today we hear Cadman's hit song of nearly 90 years ago, From the Land of the Sky Blue Water. It begins, "From the land of the sky blue water, they brought a captive maid, and her eyes were lit with lightnings. Her heart is not afraid," and so on. Text is by Nell Eberhardt. From Cadman we move to John Alden Carpenter's Looking Glass River, words by Robert Louis Stevenson. And then The Circus Band by Charles Ives. Ives also wrote the words, "All summer long we boys dreamed 'bout big circus joys." Here is Paul Sperry with Irma Vellicillo at the piano.
From the land of the sky blue water, they brought a captive maid, and her eyes they are lit with lightnings. Her heart is not afraid. I woo her with my flute. She is sick for the sky blue water. The captive maid is mute. Smooth it slides upon its travel. Here a wimple, there a gleam. Oh, the clean gravel. The smooth stream. Sailing blossoms, silver fishes, paving pools as clear as air. Our child wishes to live down there. summer long. We boys dreamed about big circus joys. Down Main Street comes the band, in a grand and glorious noise. Horses are prancing, knights advancing, helmets gleaming, pennants streaming. Cleopatra's on her throne, that golden hair is all her own. Horses are prancing, knights advancing, helmets gleaming, pennants streaming. Cleopatra's on her throne, that golden hair is all her own. Where is the lady all in pink? Last year she waved to me, I think. Can she have died? Can that rot? She is passing, but she sees me not. Hear the trombones. Where is the lady all in pink? Last year she waved to me, I think. Can she have died? Can that rot? She is passing, but she sees me not.
That was the American-born tenor Paul Sperry with Irma Vallicillo at the piano in songs by Cadman, Carpenter, and Charles Ives. This is the American Century. Let's return to the Sierra Wind Quintet and listen from Elliott Carter's 8 Etudes and a Fantasy, composed in 1950. We'll hear Etude number 5, marked Andante. Carter was born in 1908, and he's revered throughout the world of serious music as one of the major masters of the century. I think that's safe to say. The creator of a powerful musical language, quite original, often daunting, and for the serious listener and performer, paying lasting dividends for the effort put forth. Carter is not always easy listening, although the Andante we hear is lyric in nature. This, too, is Carter's first appearance on the American Century. The performance is by the Sierra Wind Quintet. We've been hearing the fifth etude from 8 etudes and a fantasy for flute, oboe, clarinet, and bassoon by Elliott Carter, performed by the Sierra Wind Quintet. It's now time for a message from the American Century Investments. In a moment, I'll return with Edward McDowell's music and Victor Herbert's cello concerto, the first movement. For Edward Alexander McDowell's second appearance on the American Century, we will hear some of his piano etudes, Opus 46. At the turn of the century, his 12 virtuoso studies were without doubt the finest ever produced by an American composer. Unfortunately, after all these years, they are almost never heard practiced by our pianists, nor performed on the concert stage. McDowell himself was a remarkable pianist, and the instrument was his closest confidant, in solo, concerto, and in his many songs. McDowell died early at age 47 in 1908. He was born the year of the opening shots of the Civil War. Today we hear 4 of the 12 etudes: Moto Perpetuo, Wild Chase, Improvisation, and Elfin Dance. The pianist is Malcolm Frager. He was born in St. Louis in 1935, and he passed away in 1991. The late pianist Malcolm Frager was heard in 4 virtuoso etudes by Edward MacDowell, a composer who bordered on greatness and whom I've always had a very affectionate feeling for. This is David Dubal, and for our concluding music on today's The American Century, we listen to a marvelous movement, in fact the best movement in my opinion, of the Second Cello Concerto by Victor Herbert. Herbert was a fine cellist who premiered the concerto himself. Next time you see his bust in Central Park, give him a salute. Lynn Harrell is the soloist, with Sir Neville Mariner at the helm of the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. That was the first movement, marked Allegro Impetuoso, of Victor Herbert's Cello Concerto No. 2. Neville Mariner conducted the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. The cellist was the celebrated Lynn Harrell. American Century Investments is pleased to sponsor the American Century on WQXR. American Century is proud to celebrate 40 years of experience in mutual fund management, providing investment services to millions. Return with us next Sunday at 12:05 p.m., where we celebrate the American composer of the American Century. This is David Dubal. Thank you for listening.